Hey, well, hello everybody. My name is Lauren Kendall Brooks, and I am the current president of BlackinPsych, and I'm really happy to be here and talk about some non-traditional or diverse careers in psychology. And if everybody can go introduce themselves, and I also feel, as I should say, very honored to speak with everyone. And I am also a part of the non-traditional psychology career club. So this is going to be, I think, a fun conversation. And if everyone can introduce themselves, say if you're comfortable where you work, and a brief elevator pitch on what your job is. And I'm going to start with Dr. Cade.
Hi, I'm Bonita Cade. I am a PhD and a JD, so I have done a lot of forensic work with regard to evaluations of competency, ability to stand trial, criminal responsibility. I've also done termination of parental rights, things of that sort. In my private practice right now, I'm a full-time professor at Roger Williams University. I teach law and psychology where the interface occurs, so mental health in the judicial system, as well as a lot of psychology courses. And I'm hoping as I retire from the university to move back into general private practice as a lawyer, and I'm sorry, as a psychologist, not as a lawyer. Okay, that's all I have to say.
Dr. Romulus.
Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Romulus. Just call me Darwin. I don't know. I'm still getting used to that. Yeah, I'll come from the academic training sort of background. Studied neuroscience at Florida Atlantic University. So now I am a games user researcher at Xbox. So I use psychology and research methodologies to understand how people interact and play video games. So that's what I do for the time being. Yeah, that's nice to meet everyone. And I will pass it along to someone else to introduce themselves.
I'll let you go ahead and start.
You called on me, right? Okay, just making sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Claudia Pinson, and I work at a care management organization here in New Jersey. I work as a quality assurance manager. So basically, our agency provides coordination of care for youth and families in the Essex County region. And I'm in charge of a team of 5 people, and we kind of oversee the making sure that everyone's receiving the same type of service, that the quality is up to par to our standards, and just supporting the team. We have about 120 staff members, and we are serving right now about 1,600 youth in the Essex County community. And yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much for being here, everyone. And myself, again, my name is Lauren Kendall Brooks. I am currently a research scientist at Assessment for Good, and my background is actually in health psychology with a concentration in behavioral and community health science. And what I do is actually create formative asset-based assessments for Black and Latinx kids ages 8 to 13. And a lot of interesting ways to do this assessment, which includes a lot of game design and user experience. I've been doing that, learning that aspect of it. So I am glad to be a part of this club that you all are in. That is, these interesting parts of psychology that are not, I think, as traditionally talked about. So my first question is, and also people that are watching, if you can please put your questions in the Q&A. I will try to answer or get as many answers as possible, but we do have a list of questions that we can start with. So the first one is, what was your original plan when you entered the field of psychology, and why did it change? So I'm going to start with you, Dr. Cade.
Okay. I think that I wanted to be a counseling psychologist because my father was a clinical psychologist. And as I was completing my dissertation and doing my internship in a veterans mental health center, because I used to have those kinds of mental health centers, I realized that a lot of my clients' problems had to do with them not understanding the system, not understanding the legalities of the system, etc. And so then I decided I would start my law license in my law school. I didn't realize at that point, one, I was pregnant with our second child, and two, that I was going to get into law school immediately. So I ran my dissertation on my breaks from law school. However, that being said, the first job that I got when I got out of law school and finished the PhD was in a mental health community center where I was doing court-ordered evaluations and working with people awaiting trial. And that sort of put me on the forensic track. And then I did custody after that. So it wasn't a planned move, but I sort of went to opportunities that were interesting at the time that were offered to me, and I sort of followed those.
So you were in law school and working on your dissertation.
Yes, and having our second child. Yes, life was exciting.
Wow. Okay. Wow. that is very different. I barely got through mine with just my pets. So
Okay. I'm not sure I got through either, or it got through me. I'm not sure what happened, but
Ms. Pinson, can you say how you got to where you are?
Sure. So when I first entered undergrad, I was definitely leaning towards counseling as well, and potentially being maybe a professor. Like, I like the teaching aspect of it when I was doing my master's. And after I finished my master's, I realized I think this is it for me in academia. It was very tough on me having just difficulties, like just life difficulties. And I felt like, okay, I've done my due diligence. I did the research that I wanted to conduct. And I think I'm going to explore other options to see what else is out there. And just to be very honest, like, living on a stipend in grad school is also very tough. So I think that was also one of the decisions that I made just because of that aspect. And I was very lucky that I had someone that I networked with that offered me a job as a QA specialist in this agency that I work at now. And just after a year, I was able to progress and get a promotion as a QA manager. So I oversee the team that I used to be part of. So that was pretty cool. And I think that it was very affirming to see that I can still use the research knowledge and kind of do more qualitative research and use that knowledge in this aspect, and kind of like a different path that I didn't imagine being, but I'm very happy in, and I'm excited that I found it, or it found me. I don't know, either or.
And go ahead with Dr. Romulus.
Yeah, so basically my original plan was to become a professor. I knew I wanted to do research. I was very interested in the brain, and I'm always interested in like technology and how a company even decides to make a product and what goes into that development. I just remember playing video games all the time when I was younger, or just like other things, like listening to music and buying iPods and stuff like that. And I was always interested in like, how do like where is the human like taken into consideration with all of this? I was like very fascinated by that. I naturally I started studying like cognitive neuroscience. So it was more of on like the neuroscience track of on psych. And so when I applied to grad school, I basically knew that I was planning to become a professor and open a lab, do research, that sort of stuff. I also wanted to see more people like myself in the field. So my plan was to basically have a lab and try to emphasize on recruiting students that were underrepresented in STEM. So that was kind of the track that I was going on. And then, I don't know, like just being in graduate school, I realized that there's like a lot of tracks that you can take outside of academia and apply like your skill sets to, you know, different jobs. So that's when I really started finding about like UX research and, you know, machine learning engineers and data science, all that sort of stuff. And so I was still like, still had this interest in becoming a professor, but I think that this sort of new interest, it kept growing and growing each year. And then I would try to find like internships and that sort of stuff. And so once I landed an internship and got to do some of that work, I was like, yeah, okay, I think this is more along the work that I want to do. Plus, you know, academia it's a great, you know, area, but I think there's a lot of like, you know, grant writing is very tedious, or just landing a job as a professor can be like really challenging. Like I remember finishing my last year and I got an offer to work at University of South Dakota, but I didn't want to move to South Dakota, so I was like, I'm like not going there. So that's kind of like the situation that you have to be in, like when you take a job, especially if it's tenure track, your first like, you know, sort of job out of grad school if you want to become a professor. And I don't know, I just didn't want that for myself. So
That's a really interesting like point to think about, and that's something that I have thought about, but I don't think I realized how much it also influenced my decision to kind of step outside of traditional academia, is where I'm going to get a job. I do want more power over where I'm going to live, and that's kind of really hard, especially being, you know, a Black woman with a Black husband. You know, if we have Black children, I want to be in a space well, they would be Black, but I want to be in a space where I feel like I could raise them safely, and you know, I want to be near my family. So that's something that I don't think I even realized why was a part of my decision, even though I've spoke about it. But that was a really good point to make. Thank you for that. Yes.
Let me suggest another alternative, because I'm in academia and never wanted to be. My father's also a professor, and my mother's a teacher. I said, I will never teach. No, not me. I don't know how I wound up back here. That was not purposeful. There are many things that happen over time that you don't know what's opening it, what's not opening up. So I was practicing mostly psychology, but some law also in probate and family court. I was doing an awful lot of things, doing evaluations. And then after we raised our first set of children, we adopted some more children and decided, geez, somebody needs to have a standard income. And a forensic position opened up. But I think the reason that I got the position was not because of research, because that's not really my thing, but because I was a clinical person. And that's what I brought to the table. And now what I bring to my graduate classes and stuff is my work on the parole board and the sexual offender board and all that. But I am more of a practitioner professor than a traditional professor. And I think as academia, thank goodness, is changing, that it is broader, and that they're looking for people who are bringing experience in, or part-time people that keep their practice and their other foot in the door, because we're trying to get students and people out into that. So my idea of what academia was, I thought I'd never be here. And again, I'm going to be leaving after a while, very soon, I hope. But it just, there are many different venues to different places, you know? And so I just wanted to add that, that's all.
No, thank you for that, because I know that someday in the future, I don't know when, I probably will end up back in academia, because I do love all these aspects. And it's been really interesting that some of the most formative people in my life that even set me down this pathway were not in academia, and now they're in academia. And so after they've retired from their other careers, now so I know that it doesn't, because I've learned so much in my little 2.5 years out, you know, after graduating, that I feel like I want to tell people that there's so many opportunities that I had no idea about. And so thank you for also reminding us that we don't know where we're going to end up. We say we want to be, that's why we're talking about diverse careers. We don't know what's going to happen. So that actually, I think, takes us to our next question is, I think it's kind of a combo. So I know we've all kind of talked about like how you learned about your current field, but what steps do you think someone can take to leverage their psychology education and skills effectively in these outside? Because I think that in schools, we don't, unless you're doing like clinical work, there's not a lot of explanation on how you can take these skills into these fields. Because like I tell people all the time, I didn't go to school for what I do, but I use all of these skills every single day, and I don't even realize I had them. I learned them. But yeah, what steps do you think someone can take to leverage those skills? Oh, anyone can go. I don't want to always call up someone, but
I can start. I think that if you have a psychology background, you can pretty much work anywhere because you have like interpersonal skills that are going to be useful. I always say that you just have to be competent, and like you pretty much can do anything in any field with a background in psychology. And I used my degree all the time, and I remember being fearful that my time in research wouldn't translate to the job market, but everything I did in that lab is very much anything I can put in a resume that would be important for any job. So for example, I remember I used to coordinate like the research assistants, and that's managing people. So even though it's very specific to a lab, it's very much transferable to any job market because you are working with people and managing them. Another example would be like, I did a lot of data analysis, and I felt like that was so like specific to the work I was doing, but being able to kind of articulate research findings or knowing how to work any statistical program is very much transferable to any job that you could work on. So I'll stop there, but I feel like there's so much more that I learned in the lab that was just so easily transferable. It's just the way that you word those skills that you learn.
Dr. Romulus.
Yeah, I can go next. Yeah, I think I think it depends on what what job you're going for. I think my approach was just look for something where the skill sets that I had was very much aligned with what I wanted to do next. So for instance, like I was interested in data science a bit, and also like UX research. And a lot of the job postings I looked at, they wanted folks that had a good statistical background, which you typically get from a graduate program. But they also wanted folks that could code in in R or Python, like using statistical programs like that. And so what I started doing is I started using those things to do my own analysis in graduate school, so that like when I came out the gate, like I already was familiar with like some of those languages. So I think you can just like look at whatever skills that the next job or the thing that you're trying to tap into, and just kind of like tailor yourself in that way. I also think that like in a lot of psychology masters and PhD programs, I mean, typically you are doing conferences, you're communicating science, right, through either writing or verbally. And that's also something that you do in industry, like knowing how to communicate findings and being like really clear about things that happen in research studies to your stakeholders is super important. And I would say that it's even more important in industry, because those folks tend not to have the same background as as someone coming from like a science or research background. And so, really being able to be clear about what you're communicating, I think that's a skill that a lot of psych majors, whether undergrad or graduate, can usually benefit from, and they can apply that, in industry. Yeah, I think I'll stop there. But there's probably so much other things that I'm not thinking about at the moment that are just like super useful and that I use on a day-to-day basis. So
I think it's really important. You both bring out really good points. And I think it is easy to undervalue what we learn in the process of going through a psychology program. I was not as aware of that as when I started law school and the difficulty I had. The reason I had the difficulty is because in psychology, we look at all parts of the human being. We look below the surface, we look at the surface, we consider all sorts of things that aren't so obvious. In law, there's a very narrow definition as to what is a relevant fact, and you ignore most of the human being, right? I think that is our strength as psychologists that we bring to the table anywhere. And I think even in the process of interviewing in a job that you think is not vaguely related to psychology, when you bring up a point your interviewer hadn't thought about in terms of interaction or underlying value system or bias, or all of those wonderful things that we think about just because automatically we've learned to think about those things. I think those are strengths that all people in psychology get training in, and we take for granted that other people look at interactions, look at the world, look at other people the way we do, and they don't. And so when you bring out the fact that, well, yeah, if we want to understand this, we need to ask a number of people this and then try to assess, or before and after measures, all those things that are part of your critical thinking backpack are crucial. But I think it's really helpful when you stop and think as individuals, what all do I bring to the table? How am I different than the other people who didn't major in this? And I think that's a question you need to continually ask yourself so that you realize how different you are. And that's a strength. And I think you can always leverage that, as everyone else has said.
That is such a thing to think about. I think that it's been like 2 or 3 situations that I've been in where someone was trying to evaluate something or look at something, and the first thing I did was come in and say, oh, like, you all are not evaluating anything. How are you getting anything from these questions? And it's just because I spent so much time making assessments for my own research that I just got really good at switching around and, being able to look at things as all these parts within one picture. And so that's just really, that's something to really think about. And also, what I've noticed is a lot of people that have gone into project management that have had a lot of skills, had a lot of time in labs. Also people that have written, thesis or just like done capstone courses, whatever, undergrad, if you're doing like a capstone or a final, your senior thesis, being able to think long-term and plan a long-term project. That's all I do is plan long-term projects. And that is something that I didn't realize I had learned from all of these research projects, my dissertation, my thesis. Now I can think into a long-term thing and it doesn't scare me. Whereas I think sometimes when you try to plan for when you say, oh, in 2 years, I plan to be here on a project, that's a really hard concept for some people to really think about. So that is something that we have learned. So yeah, thank you for that. Also, if there's any questions from the audience, please put them in the Q&A. If you have specific questions for any people or things. So my next question is, what challenges have you faced making the transition from academia or from industry back to academia or back and forth, whatever that might have been? And again, I don't want to call them people. I'd rather just,
You want it to be organic? Oh, sorry, go
yes.
ahead.
No, go ahead. You want to go first? If you want to.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go. Yeah, so I think for me, it was just convincing, recruiters or interviewers, people that I was like sort of meeting. I think I also started interviewing at a very unique time. So I would say like probably the start of COVID. That's when I started to like, reach out to folks. So you have all these challenges, like job market is like, wasn't really good and people were getting laid off left and right, which means like, people who've been at their jobs for like 10, 20 years getting laid off. And then those are the people that you're competing with when you're trying to get a job. So I think that was like one challenging thing. The other thing was just trying to convince some folks like, hey, like, okay, like I have a PhD. That doesn't mean that I'm only really good at one specific thing, And I think that sometimes that can be a common misconception that like you have a PhD, you're only really good at like narrowing in and studying one particular thing. And so that I think that was kind of like one challenge. Two, just like being able to talk in the same language as like folks who are in corporate. So, if you have a whole bunch of experience doing like quantitative analysis, maybe like I think in my CV, I was like probably writing like specific like analyses, and like for certain jobs, you don't need to do that. You just need to say like quantitative, right? Or you need to use the words that they're using in the job description to communicate like, hey, like I know what you're talking about. We're speaking the same language here. And certain things like making your resume shorter. Like I used to apply to jobs with like 5-6 pages of like CVs, like, and someone was like, no, don't do that. Like you need a 1-page resume, short and sweet of like everything that you think is relevant for this job, because recruiters are not going to have that much time. And networking was also challenging too. Like when you don't know anyone, you're kind of like, well, where do I start? Yeah, I guess I could talk about later how I overcame those challenges, but I want to give other people, other folks on the call a chance to talk about their challenges.
All right. I think one of the biggest challenges to moving into industry was having like a hard stop at 5 p.m. To me, it was like very odd, because I used to have no boundaries with my previous job in academia. Being a project manager, being a student, simultaneously meant like I had no life other than academia. And it was a hard adjustment to be like, wait, I can stop at 5 and it's gonna be okay. Like, so I think that was like a hard adjustment for me, which is positive, because now I have like set boundaries from my job to my life. The other thing that I think was a challenge, or a challenge that I overcame, is I was not used to like having so much positive feedback. And I don't know if it was just like a personal thing with like my advisor or my lab, but it wasn't as like positive in terms of feedback. And it's very odd to get like that positive reinforcement from like my CEO or just like my colleagues. Like they're so grateful for like the work that we do, and it's just like a constant collaboration that's like very positive and definitely drives the work that I do, and just kind of encourages that collaboration, which I really enjoy.
I found it difficult to go from setting my own schedule, doing a variety of things, and being measured by the profession. If I did a good report, if I testified well, etc., that being my measure, as opposed to going into an institutional environment that has rules and hoops to jump through, and having patience with that, because I'm not really an institutional person worker. That's not where I resonated. And that took a lot of getting used to. And I found I didn't have a lot of tolerance for that. I also found that communication styles are very, very different in different places. I don't like doublespeak. I don't like expecting people to read between the lines, and I'm real comfortable being blunt. Other people are not necessarily comfortable with any of those things. So I think learning where you are and figuring out the rules, and then how much you will or will not accommodate those rules, and knowing what the consequences are when you choose not to accommodate them. And we won't even get into racial cultures and ethnic cultures and religious cultures, which also need to be navigated differently at different places. I tend to work in a lot of very white spaces, okay? And so being aware of what that means at any given place, because that can mean something totally different in two different places, right? And two different institutions, and with different levels of people in terms of how you're interacting with them. But learning to read that in a way that you can do whatever job or service you have defined that you're going to do the best of your ability. So fitting into a system when there's a need to, and stepping out of the system when there's also a need to. The juggling of that I have found very challenging, not always pleasing, but always challenging, always an area of growth.
I feel like we could all talk about these challenges for so long, because there is, and the setting boundaries and knowing that you're stopping at 5. I have been recently told that I need to take at least a week off of work, because I will just take a random day here or there. And I was like, they were like, Lauren, I need for you to take a solid week. When are you going to do this? Not because you have too much time, but just because we need you to take a break. And I'm so used to someone giving me that break that I don't know how to take it, because I'll just keep going. And then again, in grad school, like you don't feel like you really have permission. It's, oh, you need to be working. Oh, you have spring break. Oh, that's a perfect time for you to get all of this work done, because you have all of this time. And so learning how to balance that, whenever I find myself, I allow myself like one too much working, like period at a time. If it's something really important, I will allow that. But then I try to take it back, and I'm still very much struggling with that. That's why I was late, because I didn't block my calendar correctly, and I allowed somebody to take the time, and I was like, but I need to talk to them. But I should have just stopped it. And I am trying to learn how to do that better. I definitely have some bad habits I'm trying to break from grad school. So I'm glad I'm not the only one alone in that. But I would like to go back to Dr. Romulus. If you could talk about some more of your challenges you said.
Yeah, just like overcoming, like I think I just started going to things, lots of networking events. So did a lot of Google searches on like, UX research and where people were talking about that. And I found, when I was living in Florida, I found like a local UX chapter. And I found like people who were like, UX professionals. And so I started going to some of their in-person events. And then when COVID hit, like everything became virtual. So like I was like networking with folks like all over the place, Texas, all over, just like talking to them. And a lot of people had more time on their hands because they were laid off and looking for a job. So I did a lot of that. And, once you find your first opportunity, you just like, you nail it, you try to do as much as possible. And that helps you for your, your second opportunity, and so on and so forth. So I think that was just like my approach, but it was frustrating in the beginning, because oftentimes some companies will go for, they'll see the PhD and they're like, okay, like, well, if you don't have any job experience, then they're like less willing to take a chance on you. But yeah, so I think that was just like one of my challenges, and I also resonate with the whole like, you know, stopping work at a certain time. Definitely, I've been doing that more often these days. Even like, you know, even if I have to take some time back to just work out, like I just do it and I figure it out. Like if something needs to get pushed back, it needs to get pushed back, because if I'm not here, like can't none of it's gonna get done. So yeah, I just try to take back my time. But yeah, I remember staying up late in grad school. Sometimes we had a little couch. Sometimes I would like sleep overnight, depending like if I needed it. And I was like, yeah, this is not this is not what we're supposed to be doing. But yeah, I don't know. I did what I needed to do in that phase of my life. But yeah, I definitely don't think those things should, you know, carry over into like your life after school. So plus it makes your back hurt like the next day like crazy. So like
Yeah, I used to, our department chair used to not come in until about noon usually, but he would leave at 8. So he would stop by the lab and Miss Kendall, it's time for you to go. Like he would tell me, and he would wait for me to pack up my things and walk me to the car, because he was like, I know you got here way earlier than I did. It's time to go. And so I definitely understand that, taking back the time. And you said something else, but I didn't write it down in time. So, the networking. I think one of the things that I knew, and but you don't realize how much networking is necessary and how many of these jobs people have gotten through different types of networking. For instance, I got my postdoc from participating in like a hashtag on Twitter. And the professor slid into my DMs and was like, hey, I looked you up and I found a poster that you did. Are you interested? Are you about to graduate? And so I don't know if can you all like kind of describe, I know Ms. Pinson, you said that someone you knew hired you. But how have you all leveraged just like your networking? Because I think that's one of the harder pieces, especially nowadays, of the different types of ways to network. Like I'm trying to get better at LinkedIn. I'm trying to, because people use it, and that's, they use it.
Yeah, so like I said before, it was someone actually that I met through the lab that used to be my RA that got a job in this agency, and then like brought me along, and then I was able to go up the ladder, I guess. But I think that even with, because we have like a board of trustees, and like just that like mentor mentee relationship, and that opportunity for networking is great, because you never know where that can lead, like to the next role in another job. So I definitely am with you, Lauren, about being more proactive in my LinkedIn profile and kind of sharing things. But I work best like in person. So sometimes I feel like that's like the way to go, because I can showcase like my skills, and like people can get to know me better than a post, but I know how beneficial that could be too. So.
Yeah, so I'll add on to how I got my first job. Basically I just kept networking with folks through LinkedIn. And then I landed on this particular group. I believe I'm forgetting the name, but they're a UX group out in Dallas. And so I met a couple of folks there. And amongst, I guess there was an opportunity coming up that I didn't even know about. And so because I had met some of those folks, and I kept, regular cadence of like meetings and just trying to get to know more people in that space and learn more about the profession. Someone had reached out to I guess, their director, and told them about me and what sort of skill sets I had. And there was alignment with like my eye tracking background, but also just like, statistics and all sorts of things. And so they were able to make like a sort of internship slash contract position for me while I was in finishing my last year. And then once I got that, I still kept networking, still kept talking to people. I learned about Xbox probably, the beginning of my last year of grad school, but I was just meeting people, talking to Xbox researchers. And then towards the end of my PhD, they had a position open. So sometimes you don't even know when a position is going to open or whatever. It's just like, people just reach out to you and say, hey, like, I remember I met you, so-and-so at this time. We have a position available, like, you should interview. And that's how I got my, like, my first, like, full-time job. Literally, I think I accepted probably, a month before I defended. I accepted the offer a month before I defended for my PhD program. So, but it was definitely like something that I was working on for a while. And I do see a lot of students, sometimes they struggle to get a job like out, right after graduation, because they might start like 3 months before they graduate, which is like way too late. So I mean, I started like a whole year. I don't know if that's something that I would recommend, but yeah, like you have to definitely have to build your network, and just, whatever you find, you got to keep looking for stuff and applying to all sorts of things. So
I think networking is something that I don't do. I'm not skilled at. I feel very awkward and very artificial at it. Like when I go to stuff and I try to purposely network, it doesn't work for me. But that being said, I think a lot of the activities that I've gotten involved with because I'm interested in what people are doing, committees, community work, stuff like that, that somebody has met me and they have given my name to somebody who gives it to somebody else. So it hasn't been really purposeful networking. And sometimes you don't know when something you say or do resonates with somebody else and they know somebody. So I guess what I would encourage people to do is, and I also, because I'm of a different generation, I think I do a lot more face-to-face. I'm not as comfortable on the internet, and I don't meet people as well there. But in person, I think that whatever opportunities that you have, you take advantage of it. You let people know what you're interested in doing, and you find other people who are interested in doing the same kinds of things, even if it's only a part of it. And you'd be surprised who gives your name to somebody, to somebody, to somebody. So you always make sure you kind of give a way to contact yourself, but it's not my strength, so I don't think I can say anything more about it.
No, I think that's also really important to say, because I am also not the best at the internet. It kind of, I'm just full of silly things, not very, not always professional things. So but on LinkedIn, on Twitter, I do maintain, I talk about myself, but I think that, like, one of the things that I do is when I go to conferences, if I've really enjoyed a talk, I go and I add them on LinkedIn afterwards. So I have talked to people in person. I do try to let them know, hi, my name is Lauren. I do this. I'm really interested in your work. Thank you for sharing it with me. Just something as simple as that. And then I go and follow up and add them on LinkedIn. And that's been a really amazing way to see them commenting on what I posted, knowing that my name is there. Just even if it's just like, oh, I remember meeting her, or I've seen her before. So those are just little things I think about, because I feel like to get to my job has just been weird networking things. It's not been a real direct path. It started off, on Twitter in 2020, and then it just kept, moving from space to space. And that's just not a really traditional way to do that. Accidentally finding jobs is how I did, but I know that that was my space and what I was supposed to be doing, so it worked out. So there was a question, and I see that you answered the question, but I wanted to know if we could, I'm going to take it also to us. It says, I'm getting my master's in counseling psychology and taking the practitioner route. How can we get into different avenues besides being a therapist? I will answer quickly for myself. I feel like I had a lot of grad students that were getting their master's in clinical psych or something of that nature. And I always just said, find somebody that is doing something that you like, and then see if you can talk to them and emulate what they were doing. That's kind of the way that I started maneuvering. Because I think I've done quality assurance. I did that for 2 years. I worked at a neuropsychology office doing TBI. I've done so many things to end up not doing any of those things now, but it gave me a lot of different opportunities. And so I think just finding people that are doing something interesting and asking them how they got there, because there's no one route to get to where you need to go or where you want to go. And sometimes you find new things along the way, because I never thought that I would be creating assessments. It was all on accident. So someone was like, oh, you can actually build these things that you keep having problems with. And I was like, I can do that. And that's how we ended up. So I will let anyone else answer that same question.
Yeah, actually, I answered privately, and my question to the person who asked the question was like, what interests you? Because you can really apply that master's in anything you want to do. So my question to them back was what actually what fires you up? And I think that once you know that, you can apply it to anything. Like in my agency, there's a lot of people that have their clinical background, but they're doing operations and they're handling other things that are still semi-related, but that's what they kind of found their passion, and that's what they want to do, kind of managing care instead of doing their direct work with the youth and families that we serve specifically. So maybe just a little introspection just to kind of figure out what sets your soul on fire, and then figuring out what path to take from there.
I think another question that you could ask yourselves, I think everybody's answer is different, is what impact do you want to make? Is there something you want to change? Is there something that desperately needs changing? And if you think about it like that, that means there are a bunch of places that exist that focus, whether they're law enforcement or schools or community health centers or hospitals, that just because you come in and say, I have this skill set and I can do this, you can also be a policymaker, and you can also influence things when you're there long enough and you see different things. So I would say go towards including nonprofits and other places that are literally agencies that are doing things that you say, yeah, this needs some more input, and I have some ideas about this, or I really want to work somehow or another in this area because it needs a change. And so think about what you're passionate about and the kinds of people you see who need change policies, and that can also lead you to different kinds of things, I think.
I think my answer is not too much different. It's just whatever you're interested in, I think try to figure out, who's doing that particular job, and learn from them and ask them hey, what did you do? What skills did you build up in order to, enter this field, right? This job market or this particular career. I think that's sort of a mix of what I did, talk to folks, figured out I knew that I had the background, that the background was relevant, but there were certain things that I needed to get a little bit more experience about, or just read up on, and just be more knowledgeable about certain things. I also think that for me in particular, thinking about someone in this, I don't know if this applies, but certain places are more receptive to folks who have less experience than others. So sometimes you can get trained, right? Depending on what the situation is, if it's an entry-level job, or if they're just willing to train you. And I feel like usually bigger companies, and I mean, I don't know how correct I am with this, but from my personal experience, I feel like usually the bigger the company, the more, you know, like, the more willing they are to kind of train you from the ground, because they have more resources, and maybe they have, like, you know, lots of, like, extensive, like, yeah, like, just resources on, like, how on that particular role. Whereas, like, smaller companies, maybe they're looking for someone to come in, hit the ground running, because they don't have as much of that, you know, background or extensive, like, resources. So yeah, I think that would be my approach, to mainly just, like, talk to someone who had a similar transition as you, and just try to learn from them and see what, you know, what skills you can build in order to get to where you want to go.
Yeah, I think there's so many things out there that we just don't know about. And until we just start looking around, I feel like every day someone tells me something that they're doing something with psychology as their background. I'm like, you can do that, you know, but it's just, it's very fun to me. So we have 2 questions, and I think we have time for both of them. The first one is from, I hope I'm saying your name right, Kamitra Mullins. It says, I just graduated in May with a bachelor in psychology and a minor in child advocacy studies. What job should I apply for? And I attend grad school in August for social work. I will reserve my comments. I will let someone else speak first.
A couple of things. You're going to be attending graduate school in social work, departments of social services, okay? Have entry-level positions, ongoing positions, do some training. Court clinics, advocacy for children. I don't know what jurisdiction you're in, but a lot of courts have their own programs. They want people to go into homes and advocate for children, see what's going on, kids who are truant, all sorts of issues are out there. So I would look at the kinds of agencies, and then I would look to some of the freestanding agencies that work with, say, battered women and their children, things like that. If advocacy is your thing, oh, there's a lot of need for it, and there are a lot of people doing it. So find out wherever you are physically going to be, including as a graduate student, and look at some of the agencies and some of the initiatives that are there. I mean, just Google it, search it, and you might be surprised at how much is out there, that they would be willing to either have you start out maybe volunteering, and then maybe later getting into something that's a paid position or supervised position, because there's a lot of need for that. And unfortunately, it's an increasing need.
I was just gonna basically say the same thing. So thank you. I also have a friend that she's a foster child advocate, but in the school system, like, or she does it for the schools. So there's a lot of different types of advocacy that is out there, especially when I saw that, I'm like, it's a whole, you know, I think that's a great place to be at. So I wish we had more time. I'm going to ask these next 2 questions. If we can just have one person answer them. I have a master's in clinical counseling. I'm currently a school-based mental health therapist. Burnout is real, and I am early in my career. I definitely want to look into other opportunities. My goal was to get a PhD, but my master's program did me in. Definitely understand that.
I can speak to that, since I was aiming for my PhD and I stopped at my master's, but I think taking time for yourself and kind of reevaluating like the career path that you've chosen, I don't think that there's anything wrong with taking that time. And especially if you feel burnt out, I think that's like a very valid feeling that I think we can all relate to. And I think going straight into a PhD program after this burnout maybe might not be the best thing. Just take some time to kind of reevaluate. I would say that's like my greatest advice, because I did take that time and I'm like, is this for me? Is academia really for me? Am I gonna commit 5 years of my life or 4 years, whatever it might be, to continuing on this path if my heart's not really in it? So
Thank you. That's a beautiful answer. The last question is, I'm a clinical psychology PhD student entering my first year, and I want to walk away from the program with NIH funding. Tips, advice, how can I get my foot in the door? I will let someone answer that. Well, because of time, do you have something to say, Dr. K?
I would do a little research on the kinds of projects that get funded. Okay. Everything's political. People open the door to people they like. Okay, first of all. So I would not fall into the trap of thinking, oh, if I objectively come up with a great idea, then I know it's going to go. No, find out the kinds of things. See if you can find a common thread in find the area that you want, but then look at the kinds of things that have gotten funded in the past in that area. Then find somebody, if you want to work, say a professor, someone doing stuff in that area, but try to build on what you know has been a sure thing. Okay, and you've got the time to do it. You absolutely now have the time to do it. So it's a good thing to be thinking about. But again, find out what's out there, what's already been funded in similar areas that you have some interest in. And you later, you can get your specific areas, but to get your foot in the door, find out what they like.
So I wish we had more time for questions. I am always cognizant of people's time. So I'm going to ask one more question. If you all can give me one statement. I do this all the time because I talk to what I call little Lauren all the time, which is just child Lauren. And is, if you could tell little you one thing to prepare you for your current field, or what you do as general, what would you tell them? I'll start with what I tell myself all the time. I tell little Lauren all the time that it's okay, that there's a way to do it. It might not be the most traditional path, but there's a way to do what you want to do, and it's okay to make mistakes along that way. I think I changed my major so many times. I've done so many different types of practicums, internships, worked with all types of different people, places, and all I did was kept eliminating what I kept knowing what I didn't want to do. And now that was really helpful. So I always tell little Lauren, it's okay. You have time. It's all right.
okay, I'll follow up with that, because I also feel like I had this set expectation of what like my career and my goals would be like. And I think I was hard on myself in the beginning because I steered away from what I had planned. But I think that if I were to tell myself something, little me, would be that it's okay that it doesn't look the way that you expected it to. It's actually turned out to be so much better and so much more fruitful and fulfilling and just healthier. So I think that I would tell little me, it's okay that it doesn't look like you had it on your agenda and you planned it the way that you did.
I would tell myself, trust the journey. Trust the journey. Be open to the unexpected turns. Trust your gut to lead you the right way. And you might not know where you're going, but you trust yourself to learn from your mistake and to meet those challenges.
Yeah, I don't want to repeat what everyone's saying, but I think it is a lot about trusting the journey and like just because you try to map out everything sometimes and it doesn't happen, that way. I think for me everything came full circle because like video games was like one of the first things that I did growing up. Like I was like 4 and I started gaming. Like I was playing, like my grandma bought me like a PlayStation 1 So I used to like play that with my brother all the time. So yeah, it's just kind of very interesting to like go through everything and then think like, oh, I'm gonna be a professor and stuff, and now I'm working in games. So and that might change, maybe a year or two or something. I'm like, maybe there's something else that's interesting that I want to do. So yeah, I think it is basically being open to the possibility of like, I don't know, just like wherever the wind takes you, wherever your interests take you, as long as you're, passionate about those things. So yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone. And I will end this with a beautiful note from someone who says that they are a senior citizen and on their second career after years of education. And they are saying to live without limits and let all of your experiences build you for wherever you go. And blessings. And I want to say again, thank you all to everyone for participating. It was such an honor to speak with all of you all and learn all about these different careers and how people got there. And that's it. I will see you all later.